Your house has been sitting on the market for weeks now, maybe longer. The showings have slowed down, the calls from your agent are getting shorter, and you're starting to wonder if something is actually wrong with your home or if you just made a mistake somewhere along the way. If that's you right now, this video is for you. Today, the Caroline Gau team is breaking down exactly why homes sit on the North Shore market, what it actually means when a listing goes stale, and the specific steps to turn it around. No fluff, no guessing, just what's really happening and what to do about it. So let's get into it. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. This is the Caroline Gau team based in Northbrook, Illinois, serving families across the North Shore for 24 years now. This channel exists to give you real, straight information about buying and selling on the North Shore. Not the polished version, the actual version. If that sounds useful to you, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell so you catch every video. Now let's talk about your listing. Here's why this topic matters so much right now. On the North Shore, timing carries weight that it doesn't carry everywhere else. Buyers here are sophisticated. Many of them are working with agents who track days on market religiously, and many of them are relocating from out of state and leaning almost entirely on their agent's read of a listing's history. So when a home sits, it doesn't just sit quietly. It sends a signal, and that signal changes how buyers approach your home, what they're willing to offer, and whether they even walk through the door. There are a handful of reasons a home stalls out, and almost all of them are fixable once you know what you're looking at. Our team is going to walk you through pricing, presentation, marketing exposure, showing feedback, and the psychology of relisting. Let's take them one at a time. The first place to look, and honestly the most sellers don't want to look at, is the price. This is usually where the real answer lives, even when it's uncomfortable to hear. Here's the thing about pricing on the North Shore market. The market doesn't lie to you gently. It tells you the truth through activity or the lack of. If your home is priced accurately from day one, you'd typically see a strong wave of showings in the first 2 to 3 weeks. And if the market is healthy, an offer within that window or shortly after. If instead you got a handful of showings and then silence, that's the market telling you the price and the product don't match in the buyer's eyes. It's not that your home isn't worth what you think it's worth. It's that on that specific day for that specific buyer pool, the price didn't clear the bar compared to what else was available. The Caroline Gau team pulls the actual competitive set every single time this happens, not a general comp report, but a look at exactly what else buyers were considering during your listing window. Sometimes a Glenview buyer looking in your price range had 3 other homes to compare you against, and 2 of them had updated kitchens or finished lower levels and yours didn't. That's not a reflection on your home, that's market positioning. And market positioning is something the team can actually solve. One nuance that surprises a lot of sellers is how buyers' agents actually search. Most searches on the North Shore are built around price band, often in increments of $25,000 or $50,000. If your home is priced even slightly above a natural band, you might be getting filtered out of searches entirely for buyers who would have loved your home at a price just below that line. The team looks at this specifically because it's a completely different problem than being overpriced for the market broadly. It's being invisible to a chunk of buyers because of where the number falls. Fixing that isn't about slashing your price. Sometimes it's a $5,000 or $10,000 adjustment that puts you back in front of buyers who never saw you in the first place. Let's move to the second big factor, which is presentation. This one is less about the number on the sign and more about what happens the second a buyer walks through your front door. Or honestly, the second they look at your photos online before ever stepping inside. On the North Shore, the vast majority of buyers decide whether to request a showing based entirely on photos. If your listing photos are dark, cluttered, taken on a phone in bad lighting, or don't show your best angles, buyers are scrolling past you before they ever give your home a real chance. The Caroline Gau team treats photography as one of the most important investments in a listing, not an afterthought. Professional photography, properly staged rooms, and photos that are taken at the time of day that shows your home in the best light. That's not vanity, that's strategy. staging matters just as much once buyers are actually walking through. A home that's still fully lived in with personal photos on every wall and closets packed to the brim makes it hard for a buyer to picture their own life there. This is especially true for young families relocating to the North Shore who are often touring 5 or 6 homes in a single day and need to be able to quickly imagine their kids' rooms, where the dog gate goes, where the holiday dinners happen. If your home has been sitting, walk through it with fresh eyes, or better yet, have your agent walk through it with you and be honest about what a buyer sees. Sometimes it's as simple as decluttering counters and depersonalizing a few rooms. Other times, the team recommends bringing in a professional stager, particularly for homes that are vacant, where empty rooms can actually make spaces feel smaller and harder to connect with than a thoughtfully furnished one. The third factor is, this is the one sellers underestimate the most, is marketing exposure. Simply being on the MLS is not marketing. It's the baseline. The question is, what's happening beyond that baseline? Is your listing being syndicated properly to Zillow, Realtor.com, and the other major portals with complete, accurate information? Is it going out to the network of buyer's agents who specialize in your specific town or price point? Is there a real open house strategy? Not just a sign in the yard on a random Sunday, but a promoted event that pulls in serious lookers. The Caroline Gau team runs listings through targeted digital campaigns, email exposure to their own buyer database, and outreach to agents who have recently shown homes in your area. Because often the most likely buyer for your home is someone who already looked at 3 other North Shore listings and passed and just needs to know yours exists. If your home has been sitting and your only marketing has been the MLS listing itself, that's a gap the team can close quickly. There's also a video component that a lot of listings on the North Shore are still missing entirely. And this is one of the simplest ways to actually stand out. Most listings in your competitive set are still just static photos. That's it. So when your listing has a real walkthrough video and theirs don't, you're not just adding a nice to have, you're separating your home from everything else buyers are scrolling past. It gives them a reason to stop on your listing instead of the next one. And practically speaking, video is also one of the best tools for driving clicks into the listing description itself, because platforms like Zillow and Realtor.com will surface a video thumbnail that pulls buyers in, and once they click to watch, they're right there next to the full description, the price, and the call to action. Our team builds video into every listing, specifically because it's still a differentiator on the North Shore. The competition mostly isn't doing it, so the homes that do stand out. Beyond video, there's the question of where the listing is actually being placed in front of people who are already looking. Social media exposure matters here, not as a vanity metric, but because a well-targeted post can put your home in front of a buyer's agent who's actively working with the family right now, searching in your exact price range and school area. The team also leans on direct relationships with agents across the North Shore brokerages, because a personal call to an agent who showed a similar home last month who had a buyer who almost pulled the trigger can do more than another week of MLS exposure ever will. And when it comes to open houses, timing and promotion matter just as much as the event itself. An open house that's been promoted through email, social, and agent outreach in the days leading up to it draws a completely different crowd than one that relies purely on foot traffic and a sign at the corner. Now let's talk about something that feels uncomfortable but is incredibly valuable, and that's showing feedback. Every single showing is a data point. If buyers are touring your home and not writing offers, there's a reason, and more often than not, buyers or their agents will tell you exactly what it is if you ask the right way and actually listen to the answer. The Caroline Gau team requests feedback after every single showing, and more importantly, looks for patterns across multiple showings rather than reacting to any one comment in isolation. One buyer saying the primary bedroom felt small might just be one buyer's preference. 5 buyers saying the same thing is information you need to act on, whether that's through staging, paint color, or furniture placement that opens the room up visually. If your current listing hasn't been generating real feedback, or if the feedback has been collected but never actually applied to the listing, that's often exactly where things stall. Let's talk about the psychology of days on market, because this is something buyers absolutely notice. whether or not they say it out loud. When a home has been listed for 60, 90, or even more days, buyers start asking themselves, what's wrong with it? Even if nothing is actually wrong. It's human nature. A long time on market creates suspicion, and that suspicion translates into lower offers, more contingencies, and buyers who feel like they have leverage to negotiate hard because they assume you're desperate to sell. This is exactly why the strategy for a stale listing isn't just fix the problems and wait. Sometimes it's fix the problems and relist. There's a real difference from a buyer's perspective between a listing that shows 90 days on market with 3 price drops and a fresh listing that just hit the market at the right price with new photos, new representation, and no negotiating history attached to it. The Caroline Gau team evaluates this on a case-by-case basis, but because sometimes a price adjustment on the listing is the right move, and sometimes a full withdrawal, refresh, and relaunch resets the psychology completely and brings in a wave of new eyes who never saw the home the first time around. One thing our team always cautions against is what's sometimes called chasing the market down. This is when a home gets a small price reduction, doesn't sell, gets another small reduction 2 weeks later, doesn't sell, and repeats that cycle for months. Buyers watch this happen in real time through the price history on Zillow and Redfin, and it actually trains them to wait you out because they can see the pattern and assume another drop is coming. A meaningful price drop works completely different. When the adjustment is big enough, it doesn't just lower your number, it actually places your listing into a new price band, which means a whole new pool of buyers that sees it for the very first time. Those buyers never watched your home sit. They never saw the small cut. To them, it's simply a new listing that just hit their search at a price they're excited about. That's the real power of a decisive move over a slow grip. It's not just about the number. It's about who's resetting, who's even looking at your home in the first place. Let's also talk about timing within the calendar year, because the North Shore market has real seasonal patterns that affect how a stale listing should be handled. Spring, particularly in April through June, is when the largest wave of buyers is active, especially families trying to close before the next school year starts. If your home has been sitting through the winter months, that's not necessarily a reflection on the home at all. It might just be the buyer pool was thinning during that window. Our team looks at where you are in the calendar and factors that into the strategy, because relisting in early spring after a slow winter listing can genuinely be the difference between a stale listing and a home that sells in 2 weeks. There's a lending piece to this too that most sellers never think about until it becomes a problem. When a home has been sitting for a long stretch, it can actually complicate the appraisal process once you do get an offer. Appraisers look at days on market and price history as part of forming their opinion of value. And a long stale period with multiple price cuts can sometimes work against you at appraisal time, even if the final agreed upon price is fair. This is one more reason the team pushes for a decisive strategy rather than a slow drift downward. A clean listing history supports a clean appraisal. A messy one with several small reductions can create friction right when you're closest to the finish line. There's also the question of what your agent is actually doing beyond the basics. This is a hard conversation, but an important one. If your home has been sitting for a long stretch and your agent's response has simply been, let's just wait and see, that's usually not a strategy. That's a lack of one. The Caroline Gau team's approach when listing stalls is to run a full diagnostic, pull the competitive set again, review every piece of showing feedback, audit the photos and the listing description, check where the marketing dollars have actually gone, and then bring you a specific plan, not a vague sense that the market will eventually come around. If you're sitting with a stale listing right now and you haven't had that kind of conversation with your agent, that's worth asking for directly. Something else worth naming honestly is that sometimes a home needs a specific targeted improvement before it will sell. And it's not always what sellers expect. It might be a dated kitchen that's genuinely holding back offers, even at the right price. It might be a lower level that's unfinished when every comparable home in Deerfield or Highland Park at that price point has a finished basement with a rec room. The team will always tell you honestly whether an improvement is worth the investment relative to what it will add in offers. Because sometimes a $5,000 refresh New paint, updated lighting, refinished floors makes a measurable difference. And sometimes the better move is a price adjustment instead of a renovation. This is exactly the kind of judgment call that comes from doing this work across the North Shore for 24 years. It's knowing which improvements actually move buyers in Northbrook versus which ones don't matter nearly as much as sellers think they will. For example, in a lot of Northbrook and Glenview homes built in the 70s and 80s, dated bathrooms come up constantly in showing feedback, but a full remodel rarely pays for itself in the time frame a seller needs. A simpler refresh, new vanity, updated lighting, a fresh coat of paint in a neutral tone often addresses the same objection at a fraction of the cost and timeline. On the other hand, curb appeal is something the team almost never talks sellers out of investing in because it's the very first impression a buyer forms, often from a photo before they even schedule a showing, and it colors how they interpret everything else about the home. Something as simple as fresh mulch, a repainted front door, and clearing out an overgrown yard can shift a buyer's entire mindset walking into the door, whether that door leads to a park, adjacent yard, perfect for soccer and sledding in the winter, or a quiet cul-de-sac lot. It's also worth stepping back and looking at the broader market conditions because a stale listing means something different depending on whether the North Shore is running as a buyer's market or a seller's market at that moment. In a tight, low inventory seller's market, a home sitting past the 2 or 3 week mark is a much stronger signal that something specific needs to change, because buyers have limited options and strong homes typically get scooped up fast. In a more balanced or buyer-leaning market with more inventory for buyers to choose from, a longer time on market doesn't always point to the same kind of problem. It might simply mean buyers have more competing options and are taking their time. The Caroline Gau team always looks at your specific listing against the current absorption rate and inventory levels in your town, not just a general sense of how the market feels, because the right response to a stale listing in a tight Winnetka market looks different than the right response during a season with more inventory sitting across Glenview and Deerfield. There's also something worth naming that has nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with how this actually feels. Watching your home sit on the market is genuinely stressful. You're checking the listing views, refreshing Zillow, wondering if you're priced it wrong, wondering if buyers are walking through and silently judging your home. That stress is real, and it's completely normal. Part of what the Caroline Gau team does in these moments is give you an honest, data-backed read on what's happening instead of leaving you to guess. Uncertainty is usually harder on sellers than the actual truth, even when the truth requires a change in approach. Let's also address something sellers rarely think about, which is how stale a listing affects your own negotiating position once an offer finally comes in. A buyer's agent sees your home has been on the market for a long stretch. They're going to advise their client to come in lower and to ask for more inspection credits, closing cost help, a longer due diligence period, because they sense there's room to negotiate. This is exactly why getting ahead of a stale listing matters so much. Every week that passes without a real strategy adjustment is a week that shifts leverage further toward the buyer. The goal of everything the team just walked through, pricing, presentation, marketing, feedback, and timing, is to get that leverage back in balance before you're sitting across the table from a buyer who already assumes they have the upper hand. So let's recap everything, because there's a lot here and it's worth having it all in one place. First, look honestly at the price, not just against the broader market, but against the specific competitive set buyers were choosing from during your listing window, and pay attention to whether you're landing in a natural search band. Second, audit your presentation, starting with photography and staging, because most buyers decide whether to walk through your door before they ever see it in person. Third, look at your marketing exposure beyond the MLS, syndication, targeted outreach, and a real open house strategy. Fourth, actually collect and use showing feedback, looking at patterns across multiple showings rather than one-off comments. Fifth, understand the psychology of days on market and know that sometimes a full relist is the smarter move over a slow drip of small price cuts. Sixth, factor in seasonal timing, because a slow winter listing doesn't mean your home has a problem. It might just mean the buyer pool was thin. And finally, have an honest conversation with your agent about what's actually being done differently. Because if the answer is nothing, that's the real issue to solve first. And when you know what to expect at each stage and you have someone in your corner who's willing to look at the real data instead of just hoping the next weekend brings better luck, the whole experience is completely different. If your home has been sitting and you're ready for a real strategy instead of another wait and see, reach out to the Caroline Gau team. The link is right in the description below. Our team has spent 24 years helping North Shore sellers navigate exactly this situation, and we'd be glad to walk you through your specific listing and tell you honestly what's going on and what to do next. If you found this helpful, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next video. And if you know someone whose house has been sitting on the market right now, send this their way. It might be exactly what they need to hear today. The Caroline Gau team will see you in the next one. I'm Caroline Gau with Real.